carathons left. We have 2 hours left of the carathon. Let's use them up. So, first off, let's get to a trivia question. Then we'll get right to Father Fred. Trivia question is for anybody 16 years of age or under. Who is the story of Santa Claus based off of? Is it A, St. Joseph, B, St. Gabriel, C, St. Nicholas of Myra, D, St. Augustine? Who's the story of Santa Claus based off of? Is it A, St. Joseph, B, St. Gabriel, C, St. Nicholas of Myra, or D, St. Augustine? 785-621-4110. That's 785-621-4110. Now, without further ado, Father, how are you doing, sir?
Oh, just fine.
Yeah, just come from school.
No, I got through teaching at about 11:45 or so, and then me and about 5 kids went to the queue for lunch.
Oh,
and
fantastic.
we had glorious grease burgers for lunch, and then then I had to go home and take care of some stuff at the rectory, and then I came down here.
Oh, fantastic. Well, if you're out there listening and you're not quite sure who Father Fred is, he has been a priest for over 30 years, serving in Hays and Salina. He ran the Catholic Campus Center at Fort Hays State University while teaching at Thomas More Prep Marian High School in Hays. Later served as the pastor at St. Joseph's Parish here in Hays. He also taught 3 years at Sacred Heart High School in Salina. During his spare time, he wrote the workbook to the Didache series of high school religion textbooks published by the Midwest Theological Forum. Currently, Father Fred Gatschet is the pastor of St. Joseph's Church in Hays once again, and he teaches religion at Thomas More Prep Marian and serves as the spiritual director for this radio station, Divine Mercy Radio. And he also records double-edged sword shows for the network when he has time. How many of those have you done? Like 150 of them?
Oh, I've done quite a few of them.
Yeah,
I lost count. That's the problem, is I sit down and think, I should do a show on that. It's like, did I already do one? So I can't remember.
There you go. All right, really quickly, congratulations to Justin Brown. Nice job, Justin. We got that trivia winner already. Justin guessed that it was St. Nicholas of Myra that the story is based off of. We'll put you in that drawing here, and we'll do that at 6 o'clock for that gift certificate to Messenger Traditional Catholic Books and Gifts. So let's dig right into it. All right, Father, what in the world are we talking about when we're discussing result-oriented morality?
Well, it's just kind of an idea. I wish I could say I came up with this myself, but I'm sure someone else has thought of it. But the idea is dealing with we're dealing with young people if you're like when I'm teaching at Thomas More Prep, and like back in the days, the 19 years I ran the Catholic Campus Center, dealing with the college students and so on. When you're talking about issues, and so we can. Let's just pick an issue. There's a number of hot button issues of the day, like, pornography. All right. And so someone, Pope St. John Paul the Great, with the Theology of the Body, wrote eloquently about this, not just about pornography, but one of his great lines was, the problem with pornography is not that it shows too much, it's just that it shows too little.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't show the mind and the heart and the soul and the intellect and so forth of these people. All it shows is the outer shell. And so, and then, the idea of human dignity, and that, people shouldn't be subjected to this kind of stuff. And there's all sorts of, beautiful teachings like that. But the problem is that if you are at some university somewhere, some public university, and you're in your sociology class, your psychology class or something, and the topic comes up, and if the predominant wave of the conversation is, well, it's what I do in my own house with my internet connection, as long as it doesn't involve kids, it's my business, stay out of my business. Okay, well, so don't rub your religious rule book in my face. You might believe all that religious mumbo jumbo, but I don't. And it's like, okay, well, very good. So let's maybe ask ourselves a different question. Let's look at the results of pornography and ask ourselves if we like living with those results. And, the numbers have been out for a long, long time. One of them is 100%. If you tell people that, well, there's a 98.7% chance of something, they'll go, well, I'm part of the 1.3. It won't apply to me.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, sure. You're stupid. But in this case, it's 100% of the men currently doing time in prison for rape were regular consumers of pornography. 100%. And so we ask ourselves, okay, is pornography generating a good or a bad result? And I think it's obvious that it's producing a bad result. And so therefore, why would we want it? Now, I know I did a double-edged sword program a while back about supply and demand, and the idea being that if you can go and you can try to make it illegal, well, good luck with that.
Mhm.
You would never be able to police the internet and so on. And so the idea is that, well, rather than just, we'll just make it illegal and problem solved, because it won't solve the problem. We have the much harder job in front of us of converting minds and hearts and souls, and getting people to see, now look, this is not generating a good result. And so therefore, why do you want to mess with this stuff? This is radioactive. It's best just to leave it alone, and get people to see that. Or the idea that good old Jill Ireland. I don't know if you're. I'm getting old now, so a lot of the people I bring up, people don't know who some of these people are, but she was a real a feminist activist during the 60s and 70s, and one of her endearing lines was, "A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle." Okay, and so now you've got this tremendous movement in the culture that women don't need men. Well, they don't, as long as they're getting fat checks from the government. And so you'll have the infamous unwed mother, the woman that never got married, just got pregnant, and now she's going to raise the kid on her own, and so on. And the society makes her out to be some kind of a great hero. I'm here to tell you folks, she is not. Okay.
Yeah.
And so again, two ways of looking at this. Well, if you have sex outside of marriage, that's fornication. That's a mortal sin. The Bible teaches us that sex belongs between men and women, and in the state of matrimony, and that outside of matrimony, that's sinful. Well, again, you'll have other people going, well, that's your religion, you and your superstitious religion. You can spout that all you want, but don't impose it on me. Fine. Then we'll ask ourselves the question: this, a boy raised by just his mother is 200 times more likely to go to jail than a boy raised by both a mother and a father, or a boy raised by his father alone. See, maybe, according to Jill Ireland, maybe a woman doesn't need a man like a fish needs a bicycle, but the kid does.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can look at the result of this and say, all right, we have the United States has this huge percentage and huge number of our population that's incarcerated, and of the men who are incarcerated, 80% of them are the sons of unwed mothers. And to put a guy in jail like that for whatever you got him in jail for, that costs the taxpayer about $70,000 a year. The number that keeps coming out over and over again, that it costs more to keep a guy in jail than to send him to Harvard. And so we ask ourselves, okay, so 70,000 a year to put this guy in jail, and to take care of all the stuff that has to be taken care of. He's in jail, and who's paying for that? Oh yeah, the taxpayer. And so we ask ourselves the question: is all this unwed motherhood generating a good or a bad result? And I think we can agree that it's generating a bad result.
Yeah.
And so therefore, why do we want to go down that road? Why don't we, again, you can't make it illegal. I mean, that's not going to do any good. But instead, we have to change minds and hearts and souls to get people to see that, well, the proper place for children to be born and raised and so forth is with a mother and a father who are married, and even just legally married by the state of Kansas. Of course, in Catholic land, we have the sacrament of matrimony, which is even better. But having that. And so, like I said, I think, there's two ways of looking at it. We can look at it, from the scriptural, moral teaching of the church way, which for, believing Catholics in church on Sunday, that probably works pretty good. But outside of that form, it doesn't. And so we need to be looking at, well, let's look at the results, and let's see if this is generating a good result. So that, that's kind of what I want to do is, for the carathon here for the next hour or so is, talk about this idea of result-oriented morality, and ask ourselves, our decisions that we're making and our courses of action that we're taking, are they generating a good or a bad result? Now, the thing is that, we can look at the teachings of the church, we can look at the teachings that come out of the scriptures, and that'll take us to a certain point. The thing is if we look at this, the idea of result-oriented morality, it'll get us to the same point.
Yeah.
We end up going to the same place. And so, like I said, we can say that, babies should be born into a home where there is a mother and a father joined in matrimony. That's the teaching of the church. That's, the teachings in the scriptures. Well and good. And then we know that's the end point where we should be. Or we can say, well, when that doesn't happen, when children, boys are born out of wedlock and away from a father and a mother and so on, then we have these sky high incarceration rates, which is very expensive and so on. And then we want to ask ourselves, is that what we want? Well, the answer is no. And so again, we end up at the same point. That faith was getting us, that, children should be born into families of mothers and fathers joined in some state of matrimony. So that's kind of that's the method that I want to apply today.
Absolutely. I think if we do look at the pornography issue, one of the things we can even look at there is you can find this in its non-religious studies, scientific studies, where it shows that males who are viewing pornography within their marriage are 2 times as likely to get divorced as their counterparts. Women, 3 times as likely. Then, same thing. We go, okay, well, is divorce good for children? And unfortunately, in the United States, with no fault divorce, we've basically just turned it into, I don't like you anymore. I don't like you anymore. Okay, see ya. And there's not even I guess what I'm saying is there used to be some ugliness in divorce, and I'm not saying that they're not, but the United States has made it so easy that people can just basically call it quits without any struggle, without trying to get through it. And we know that divorce is horrible for children. That's one of the outcomes also that they show. Okay, well, do they fare worse or better in school? Worse. Do they fare worse or better in secondary education? Worse. And you start going through that and you're like, yeah, divorce is not good for children. Pornography causes divorce at a way higher rate. Ergo, no good.
Right. So again, that's kind of what we're going to look at. The issue that I wanted to talk about today is, the kind of using this method of looking at things is families and family size. And I've become kind of a great fan of the Wall Street Journal. I read it every morning. I subscribe to it electronically online. And so I get up at 4, take the dogs out for a walk at 4:30, get back by about 5. Then I got to say my morning prayers and stuff. But then I have about 20 minutes or so before the 6:30 morning mass to read the journal. And I've been noticing for the past year or so, it seems like about every week to 10 days, there's another article or an editorial or just piece of writing in there about the amount of trouble that we are in, because our culture and Western culture, which would include all of Western Europe, the United States, Canada, Japan, all these countries are in a world of hurt because they don't have enough babies. And we have got to have more children because for reasons that'll become obvious here. So again, but what we're going to look at here is, again, there's 2 ways of looking at this. One is, what does the church teach? Okay. What do we know from Scripture? We know from Scripture that in the eyes of God, children and a family and a large family are seen as a blessing from God. And the church teaches that. Now, does the church teach that every couple is obligated to go out and have 18 kids? No. But we're living in a time where if a family would have 18 kids, that would be a great, blessing for society, because we need people. But the church isn't saying that. The official teaching of the church is that the number and the spacing of births is something that is totally up to the husband and the wife, the mom and the dad. That is their decision to make and nobody else's. And so, my purpose here is not to berate someone or berate a family that had 2 kids or something like that, but I will berate this attitude that's out there that having large families is somehow irresponsible. I'm the second oldest of 10 children, and growing up, people would make the most remarkable statements. I can remember as a teenager, we'd be talking at some forum or whatever, and and oh yeah, there's 2.6 kids in my family or whatever, and well, what about yours, Gatschet? Oh, there's 10. 10? Gosh, didn't your parents have a TV or something? Or they would even tell my mom, she would be talking to people and, well, how many kids have you got? Well, I've got 10. 10? That's too many. And mom would say, which one should I kill?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good answer.
I mean, there's the great line from G.K. Chesterton. First, let's let all the children be born, then decide which ones to kill, And, but anyway, but like I said, the teaching of the church, and my point here is not to, come down on people who didn't have very many children, but I am kind of come down on the attitude that having a larger family is somehow irresponsible or, whatever. And, there's two articles here from the Wall Street Journal. One comes from Thursday, December 4th, 2025. It says, will Trump accounts help families? And it's, maybe people have heard that President Trump is proposing whenever a kid's born, they get an account set up with them, from taxpayer dollars with $1,000 in it. And then they wouldn't have access to that money until they were like 18. And so over the the ensuing 18 years, like if grandma and grandpa want to put some more money in there, or if mom and dad are able to put some more money in it, fine, but it'd be invested and so on, so that when they reach 18, they want to start a business, they want to go to school or something like that, they have some money to fall back on. I personally don't think that that's going to generate much of a result, and we'll see why here in just a second. But the idea is, it says here at the beginning of this article, it says fertility rates in the U.S. have never been lower. Could a $1,000 Trump account for newborns plus Tuesday's announcement of additional $250 for some children 10 and under persuade Americans to have more kids? Would this $1,000 account persuade, get mom and dad American to go, well, I guess since they're going to get $1,000 out of the deal, let's have 3 or 4 more children. See, that's why I don't think that's going to work. But nonetheless, it says here that there's a guy named Michael Knowles, and he says, for most of my life, we've been told that having kids is a burden. We should put it off, and we should prioritize ourselves and our careers. He goes on to say, the very fact that our government is putting money aside for children reestablishes the old standard that it's good to have kids.
Yeah.
So maybe, things are kind of, coming around full circle. There's another guy named Blake Moore, who's a Republican congressman from Utah, and he says the policy isn't meant to boost the fertility rate, but intended to invest in the next generation. Well, I say kind of good luck with that. It says here that more young couples say they feel the need to be established in their careers and financially secure before having kids, and standards have risen to what parents want to provide. That, I think, is a big deal. You have people that, first of all, when we look at the next article that I have from the Journal, which came the day before on the 3rd of December, we've got just fewer and fewer people getting married. They just don't get married at all. Okay. And the few that do get married are saying, well, if we're going to get married, but we're not going to have kids until we've got money in the bank and the house is paid for or whatever. And, so that we can give the kids everything. And again, it says here in this article, the first one, that it says that standards have risen to what parents want to provide. Well, I'm sitting there thinking, if I'm a parent and, my wife and I are looking at the prospect of having children, and we're going, well, gee, should we have 1.6 kids and then just cap it off at that? Or, should we just accept what the Lord gives us and take it from there? Well, the thing is if I'm looking at the prospect of having 6 or 7 or 8 children, and I'm going, gosh, and you mean I am going to have to have a car for every one of those 8 kids, and I'm going to have to, pay for an insurance policy, car insurance for each one of those 8 kids, and then the other things that might come along like braces and whatever else and so on. Well then, heck yeah, I'm gonna have to have a cell phone contract for every one of those 8 kids. That could be daunting. But see, I think what the deal is, what it's like, it says in this article, that standards have risen for what parents want to provide. I think that needs to be reevaluated.
Yeah.
That parents, should, I mean, I'm sure there's all kinds of pressure among parents, well, the Smiths kids all have cell phones. Why don't our kids all have cell phones? The Smiths kids, they all drive their own car. Why don't our kids all drive their own car? Well, it's time to kind of stand up against that. And there's kind of, couple of things I want to say about the idea of making pronouncements about family size and so on. Whenever Humanae Vitae came out in 1968, if you're old enough to remember those days, there's like a bomb going off. There was a number of people who there's a sections, whole sections of the society, including a lot of bishops and priests, a lot of clergy. They were just sure that in the wake of Vatican II, that whenever Paul VI re-examined the whole topic of abortion and artificial contraceptives and things like that, that he was going to kind of get up there with the Episcopalians, everybody say, well, we're going to kind of remove the moral stigma from contraceptives, and if the husband and the wife have good cause to use it, then well and good. And Paul VI said no. Paul VI said, he just reiterated what had been said before in Costi Connubii, that artificial contraceptives are bad news. Now, we can do the same thing. We can ask ourselves the question. We can say, well, the church teaches that contraceptives are bad news and so on. Well, as a Mr. Pope, you don't play it a game, you don't make it a rules. That's what they would say back in those days. And it's like, all right, so then let's just look and see the results.
Yeah.
What are the results? What have the results been of 60 years of unleashing artificial contraceptives on the world? And I think we can see the results haven't been that great. The other thing is, people, well, gee, Father, you don't have kids. What are you doing on the radio telling us about it? Well, the argument from experience, I think, is always kind of a bogus argument. If you had cancer, would you demand that your oncologist have cancer as well? The idea is, well, gee, I have cancer. I need to be treated for my cancer. And your oncologist comes in and says, well, we're going to do this or this. Well, what do you know, doc? Have you ever had cancer? Who are you to tell me how I should be treating my cancer if you haven't had cancer yourself? I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, I'm not claiming to have, all the answers and all the experience of raising kids and so on, but I do know how to read, responsibly written articles and so on that are telling us that by not having so many children, we are in a world of trouble.
Yeah.
And we have got to start, we're working harder on that. And again, if you have parents that are feeling this tremendous pressure that, there's no way I can provide a cell phone and a car and a college education and on and on and on and on and on for more than 2 kids. And so therefore we're not having any more kids than that. That line of thinking, needs to be challenged, I think.
Absolutely. I want to jump in here really quickly because I want to thank Alan and Gloria Brungart of Hayes, who donated $500, and that is $1,000 donation with those matching funds. Let's see if we can get them used up. We've got Father Fred Gatschet, our spiritual director here at Divine Mercy Radio, in talking some amazing wisdom for us and helping us to look at things through result-oriented morality. If you like what you're listening to, if you want us to keep putting out good Catholic content, call 785-621-4110 and donate now. We've got an hour and a half left. Let's see if we can use up those matching funds. 785-621-4110. Father, something that you said, there's so many things that we can look at. And I agree. I think that needs to be challenged. So one of the first things I think we can look at is the United States actually is in a population decline if you look at just United States citizens having children. The only reason why in the recent years our population has been going up is because of immigration.
Exactly.
That's the only reason. Europe has the same problem. Russia has a problem. China has a problem. And some of those societies have actually started trying to do the same thing, give an incentive to pay people to have kids, and it hasn't worked because, like you said, you throw money at it and they're like, I don't know if that's worth it. But maybe just a couple thoughts on it too is, I'm not the end all be all. I do have 7 kids and there are sacrifices that come with that. But also I like that you want to challenge this because, for a long time, when my wife and I started having kids, we decided we don't need internet. It's about impossible to do that in today's age anymore, but we did it. For a long time, we don't need a cell phone. In fact, the kids at school, a lot of them that I taught, they I think thought the world was ending when I finally got rid of my flippy phone. And so yes, are there sacrifices that need to be made? Absolutely. But I think in those sacrifices too, you find that you become less selfish. You find the things that are important and what are needed, And here's another thing that I find with kids who don't have everything, they actually don't miss it because they've never had to deal with it.
And they appreciate more what they have.
Absolutely. And it doesn't bother them so much. Yeah, there's going to be kids, at school like, oh, you don't even have a phone. And yeah, well, our kids don't get smartphones. They don't get a phone until they get up into high school. And even then, it's generally a shared phone for the house, And so, yes, there are sacrifices that need to be made. But like Father said, kids are appreciative of it. And you're never going to, as you said, you're never going to look back and be like, geez, I wish I didn't have that kid.
Yeah.
So where do we want to go from here?
Well, again, like I said, there was just that one article talking about Trump's $1,000 a kid, fund, to get a kid started. And like I said, I'm just really not convinced that that's going to convince people that they should have more kids.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, Europe, the United States, Japan. If anybody looks back, I'm 64. I think I'm 64 now. If you're kind of my age or a little bit younger, a little bit older, that, back during our high school years, during like the 70s and 80s and so on, this was seen as great progress. If a country could say that we have achieved zero population growth, and we achieve zero population growth through having lots of contraceptives and abortions available when the contraceptives fail. And again, Humani Vitae, the Kasi Kanubi, the teaching of the church, abortions and contraceptives are bad news. And well, that's fine if you're a Catholic. If you want to believe that Catholic mumbo jumbo, fine with me, but don't rub it in my face. Don't impose it on me. Okay, fine, I won't. Instead, I'll look at the results of what 60 years of contraceptives and abortions have done for us, of dwindling our population. We don't have enough workers now, and again, it's like there's another one. This other article that appeared on the 3rd of December. It's talking about it says to maintain a stable population, every woman has to give birth to 2.1 children on average during their lifetimes. This is the replacement rate. This will just keep the population flat. As recently as 2007, fertility was close to that rate. Since then, it has fallen, reaching a record low of 1.6 in 2024. And so, we're way below the replacement rate. Now, over time, this will mean less demand for childcare and fewer pupils in pre-kindergarten through elementary school. Within a generation, it will entail a diminishing number of working age adults to finance healthcare and retirement for the expanding elderly population. Today's young adults will likely see the population shrink over their lifetimes. Unless birth rates rise or Americans are willing to accept large inflows of immigrants, principally from African and Muslim countries that have surpluses of working age adults. Now, again, well, this is a Catholic making anti-Muslim comments on the radio. Nope, we're just going to look at results. You've had these huge influxes of Muslim immigrants into England, into Germany, and into France. I don't know if anybody's been watching very closely to see how that's worked out, but it hasn't worked out. And you've got these 3 countries now that are frantically trying to salvage their national identity, because the Muslims move in and they don't assimilate. It's like, no, we come, we have the Quran, we have our own religion, our own laws, our own rules, and this is the way that we're going to live, like it or not. In Christianity, I think largely because, when Jesus said, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar and give to God what belongs to God, Christians have always been pretty good at working with the secular government. And but Muslims, deliberately are not. Now, again, like I said, if there's a Muslim imam out there, someone wants to call and set me straight, feel free. But like I said, all the the various articles and so forth that I've read over the past 10 years about places where we've had huge influxes of Muslim immigrants, it's not working out very well. And so we have to ask ourselves the question, do we want to repopulate the United States with Americans, or do we want to import the necessary labor that we're going to have from places that are probably hostile to our way of living? And so again, I think that's we can look at it one of 2 ways. Well, the church teaches contraceptives and abortions are bad. Okay, well, I don't believe in the Catholic Church. Fine. Let's look at the result that we have. and ask ourselves, is this something that we want to keep going? And so again, I think that, what's going to happen is we're going to have to rethink and, change our attitudes and our behaviors in regards to marriage and the number of children we have in our families.
Absolutely. I want to take a real quick break to thank an anonymous pledge of $100. That's $200 with our matching funds. And that is a very big thank you that you're continuing that ball rolling. Let's keep it going. We are getting close to meeting our matching funds. Call 785-621-4110. That's 785-621-4110. Let's get back with Father Fred here in just a second. First, I'm going to read the other trivia question for those who are 16 and under. Get your phones ready. Ask your parents to help you call in. 785-621-4110. Who is in the Holy Family? Is it A, Jesus, B, Mary, C, Joseph, or D, all of the above? Who is in the Holy Family? Is it A, Jesus, B, Mary, C, Joseph, D, all of the above? 785-621-4110. Okay, Father, as you were
16 and under.
Yes, there you go. Thank you. As you were talking, something really hit me. I always have to laugh when I'm like, yep, church has been teaching that since its inception, or as long as this was about. As you're talking, and Pope Paul VI said, nope, bad idea. And like you said before him, Casti Connubii, nope, bad idea. Well, I've seen commercials within the last 5 years. Because the world is, or at least there are some people out there starting to figure out, like, actually dumping all these drugs into female bodies is not great for them. And so I've seen secular people start going, now you can track your cycle naturally. And I'm like,
NFP is going to go mainstream.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was like. Oh, yeah, that's called natural family planning. Church has been talking about that for eons. But I do have to agree with you because, at some point, some of secular society is like, wait a minute. In fact, I think you brought this up a couple years ago. We have all these people who go, I want everything all natural, man. Like, I don't want to put anything in my bodies. I want to go to the grocery store, no GMOs or nothing like that. But I'm going to throw this poison into my body regularly every single day. And so it just kind of, it does not equate that if you're saying, okay, I think this is a good thing, but yet it's harmful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've talked about this at length, that, I remember one time years ago, I went to Walmart, to the drug department there, looking for my recreational drug of choice, Alka-Seltzer plus cold medicine. It's good for what ails you. You get a little bit of a bug coming on, you take that stuff and you can, it clears your nose up and you can sleep and everything. And so I'm out there and the lady comes up, can I help you, sir? I said, yeah. Where's the Alka-Seltzer plus cold medicine? Oh, didn't you hear? I said, no. And then I later went over and looked it up. What had happened was, in this country of 380 million people, 380 million, there were 6. How many? 6. Not 6 million, not 6,000, not even 60. 6 individuals around the country who had gone to emergency rooms with irregular heartbeats. And the one thing that they all said that they had done was they had taken Alka-Seltzer plus cold medicine. And, they didn't know maybe the antihistamine or the can decongest, whatever. It's got all kinds of stuff in it. That maybe that was causing the irregular heartbeat. So they pulled every box of Alka-Seltzer plus cold medicine off every shelf in the whole country because 6 people had these palpitations. Now, anybody out there, if you're using birth control pills, I challenge you, get your package out. It always comes with this big thing that folds out like an old-fashioned road map. It's a huge piece of paper. And in it, it will say, and I think even the World Health Organization some years ago classified the birth control pill as a class 4 carcinogen.
Yep.
Okay. And so, there's the class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4. Class 1 is, it's like peanut butter and jelly. It doesn't cause cancer. It's totally safe. No big deal. Class 2 is, it's on our radar. We got no proof, but we're kind of suspicious. Class 3 is, we're pretty dang sure. We just got, once we do a little bit more research, we'll know for sure. We're pretty dang sure this causes cancer. In class 4, it's like a cigarette. It's like cigarette smoke. We know this causes cancer. And so the hormones in the hormone cocktail and the birth control pill, we know it causes, and it says so in the thing that you get with the birth control pills. It says this product will cause blood clots, strokes, cancer, and so on. And we unleash this stuff on all these women over the whole world. And whenever this stuff happens, we'll just have breast cancer awareness month. That'll take care of that. And it's like, well, it just doesn't make any sense,
Yeah.
So again, like I said, we can look at it from the spiritual, moral side. This is what the church teaches, or we can look at the result. Is the result of our mothers and wives and daughters being subjected to this cancer-causing, compound, is that generating a result that we want? And I think any reasonable person would say no.
Absolutely. Really quickly, want to thank Dave and Janet Schmidt, owners of Dave's Auto Repair. They pledged $2,000, so that does help us break down that matching funds. I think we're probably down around $2,000 in matching funds, maybe $3,000, somewhere in there. We're getting close, folks. Help us to break over the end there. 785-621-4110. That's 785-621-4110. Also, thank you, sweetie, for listening. My daughter Cecilia is the trivia winner, who's in the Holy Family. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, all the above. You got a good mom since she's letting you listen to the Catholic radio, honey. Love you. Congratulations. We'll get you put into that drawing. If you would like to donate, please call 785-621-4110. We're getting close. We started this hour with a little over $100,000 in total pledges from all of you out there. We've probably got around $2,000 to $3,000 left in matching funds. We want to use them up before the 6 o'clock break, or we end at 6 o'clock. So call 785-621-4110. But let's get back to Father Fred. All right, Father, where are you going to take us from here, sir?
Well, this article from the Wall Street Journal from December 3rd, 2025, named The Great American Baby Shortage. Along with the baby shortage is a marriage shortage. And this guy has some numbers here. And he says that between 1960 and 1980, according to the Pew Research Center, about 6% of U.S. adults over 40 had never been married. So from 60 to 1980, 94% of adults had been married. By 1990, that figure had risen to 10% who had never been married. By 2000, 15% had never been married. By 2010, 20% had never been married. By 2021, 25% had never been married. And then you get to 28% of men and 22% of women. And marriage rates vary from demographic groups. 46% of 40-year-old Black Americans had not been married. 27% of Hispanics had not been married. 20% of whites and Americans with high school diploma or less were twice as likely to be never married at 40 than those with bachelor's degrees. And then it says, for the first time in U.S. history, the majority of women 18 to 44 aren't married. Twice the rate of unmarried women of the early 1980s. Okay, so what's going on here? Well, it says a 2025 American Family Survey conducted by Brigham Young University's Wheatley Institute offers clues. It says since 2018, the survey finds pro-marriage attitudes have declined. Shrinking shares of American society agree that we're better off with more people who are married, and that marriage is needed to create strong families, or that marriage makes people better off financially. So more and more Americans do not believe that that we're better off with more people married, that marriage is needed to make strong families, that marriage makes people better off financially, which again, the data shows that you do need to have married couples to make strong families, and that married couples do tend to be better off financially, and that the society is better off when people are married. And so the thing of it is we've got people now that are saying no. And it says, while most people aren't overly hostile to marriage, they're becoming indifferent to it because they don't see that its utilities. You don't see its utility or its advantages, even though family scholars across the political spectrum agree on its economic, social, and individual benefits. So again, you go to secular sociology departments or whatever, and they're going, well, yeah, I mean, there's no doubt, there's no question. The data and the numbers show that when people get married, society's better off, the kids are better off, the families are better off, and so on. And but we just have people saying, I don't believe that. And it says even among married Americans, the childbearing rate is down. It says economics might be a factor. 7 in 10 Americans say raising children is financially unaffordable. But there's another clue. While 35% of men think that Americans are having too few babies, only 18% of women agree. So 35% of men are saying we need more babies. 18% of women are saying no, we don't. Only 18% of women agree with that we need to have more babies. And then this guy says, perhaps women's support for additional children would increase if they didn't have good reason to suspect that they would do most of the work raising them.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So if, the guys would step up to the plate a little bit and take a little bit more responsibility taking care of the kids. But anyway, like I said, the whole idea behind going through these two articles, that's one of the things I like about Catholic radio. It gives me lots of time to kind of go through and, talk about, statistics and numbers and, kind of read you some of the stuff firsthand of these resources. That's one of the nice things about Catholic radio. It gives you a chance to do that. But again, my point is to look at this and say, well, the church teaches that family life is a good thing. The church teaches that, contraceptives are not a good thing. And, that having, larger families is a good thing because God wants to have lots of souls for heaven. And, again, somebody might say, well, Catholic schmatholic, if you Catholics want to do that, go right ahead, but leave me out of it. How dare you impose your Catholic theology on me? Okay, fine. I won't do Catholic theology. I'll do what the Pew Research Center says. How about that? Let's just look at the numbers here, and let's look at the numbers and see what they're showing us. Now, again, like I said earlier, I want to repeat this again. The purpose of this, presentation is not to talk down to people who haven't had very many children, and, because the church teaches that is a decision that belongs squarely with the husband and the wife, with the mother and the father, and that, nobody has any business telling them how many kids they should or should not have. But what I am, overtly, directly attacking is the attitude among so many people that having children is somehow a bad deal. It's a bad thing. Back during the 60s and 70s and 80s, the whole deal was, well, we have to have zero population growth because we're going to have overpopulation, and with all these extra people, we're not going to be able to feed them and so on. That's like the climate change hoax. We've been told now for decades that, the world's going to overheat and so on, and that never happened. Well, you go back to the 1800s with old Thomas Malthus in jolly old England, that was saying that, we're the population is going to explode and we're not going to be able to have enough food, and, people are going to die from massive starvation. Well, then, he said this is, and he had a date when that was going to happen, and that date came and went, and everybody was doing just fine. And so it just kept on getting pushed, further and further into the future. And there's a guy named Paul Ehrlich, another, academic whack job from Stanford University, in the 1970s said the same thing, that we're going to have, there's too many people on earth and we're all going to starve and we're all going to die, and all those people have been wrong. And so, why people keep listening to them, I don't know. And so again, my point is just to say, let's just look at the results here. These people won the day. They succeeded in getting Western Europe, the United States, Japan, to some extent, Russia and all these various countries to say, we're not going to have so many kids. Okay, fine. But now we don't have enough people to man the economy. You look around here, you look around town, you talk about someone to, trying to get your roof redone or something. They say, well, yeah, here we are, here it's, December, we'll get to that maybe like by next fall sometime. Or, you try to get a plumber, you try to get electrician, you try to get someone to come in and do some work for you. And we just don't have enough of them. And it's good to see, that, people that run heavy equipment and welders and craftsmen and tradesmen and so on, they're starting to command 6-digit salaries, mostly because of supply and demand. The supply of these folks is really, really low. The demand is really high. And so they're having to pay them more, which is a good thing. But like I said, the idea is we can look at this from a Catholic point of view. And the thing is, I think most Catholics wouldn't even buy it. Most Catholics don't want to be told that, having larger families is a good thing. And it's like, well, okay, if you don't want to listen to your church, fine, you don't have to. But at the same time, look around, look at your community, look at your culture, and ask yourself, is this what you want? Is this a result that you want? And I think most of us have to say no, and we're going to start making some attitude adjustments and some changes in the way that we think, to get back on track to embrace the children, embrace families, embrace family life, and so on, so that we can get our economy back on track.
Yeah, I think that makes a great point. Really quickly, we've got to hear about 10, 15 minutes left here, but I want to thank Abby Huguenin, who pledged $200. Thank you so very much, Abby, helping us to use up all of those matching funds. Her pledge then becomes a $400 pledge because of those matching funds. So thank you very much. If you'd like to partner with Abby, please call 785-621-4110. That's 785-621-4110. We're going to jump right back into things with Father Fred. So Father, as you were talking, something that I was thinking about is I used to pass on an article about this. It was an African nurse, and she wrote to Melinda Gates because Bill and Melinda Gates wanted to pump a whole bunch of aid into Africa, but the aid was contraception. It was, hey, you guys have this population problem. Let's do that. She wrote back, and you can look it up. I think it's just called A Nurse Writes to Melinda Gates or something, and just flat out tells her, we don't want your legacy here. And I'm not trying to say that everything in Africa is all hunky dory or anything like that, but the people there got it. When she writes to her, she says, no, we love children and they are a gift. When somebody has a baby here, the whole community shuts down and we celebrate it. So keep your hands out of our country. And I thought it was a really good testament to what you're saying here, is that, if people just learn to be like, okay, children aren't a detriment. They're not something that is like, oh man, they're beautiful. They're a gift. And if you can look at it that way, then you can also maybe start saying, okay, well, what do children do for our society? What does it do if we have a known mother and a known father as compared to only a mom, only a dad, something like that?
Well, again, I just have to look at the results and see, where it leads you. I know that one of my former students years ago, he and his wife went off and joined the Peace Corps, and they went off and did their tour of duty with the Peace Corps and everything, came back, and they came back when I was teaching at TMP, and we're talking to the kids, and they were talking about the kind of like what the guy you talk about, right, to Melinda Gates, and it's like, in our culture, like years ago when I was teaching at TMP, one of my favorite students, we were talking about stuff, and we were having this very conversation about family size and stuff, and she wasn't being nasty or anything. She was just being so very matter of fact, and you could tell, this is the world she has been raised in. Because we were talking about kids and how many kids per family, and she goes, in total seriousness, and again, she wasn't being, acidic about it or anything. She goes, well, but Father, if there was more than me and my brother in our family, we wouldn't get as much. And it's just like,
true, but
and or I had another student again. When I was glad when I came back. He's got a number of children now, which is great. And we were talking in class sometime about this, and I said, we were talking about kids. And, well, how many kids in your family? So there's 10 of us. And he goes, well, yeah. And how many of you got to go to college? I said, well, all of us. And I said, in fact, my sister and I both have postgraduate degrees. And so, the idea that, that you have a number of children in your family means that you're not going to be able to go to school. You're going to be stuck in poverty and things like that. That just doesn't wash. And but the thing is, the attitude of these young people, they're kids. They're just soaking up they're just repeating what they soaked up from the culture. And so again, the one girl is saying, well, my brother and I wouldn't get as much. Well, what my former student that was at the Peace Corps said, he goes, yeah, in our culture, we look at, so, okay, who's going to get the most up-to-date iPhone? Who's going to have the coolest clothes? Who's going to have the snazziest car, and so on. Whereas and he was in Africa for his Peace Corps thing. He goes, the people there, it's just like, what about my family? It's family life. It's getting together, getting your family together and doing things as a family and celebrating as a family. That's what, life is all about. Here, life is all about what can I acquire? And if that's going to be our life, if that's what's going to be important to us, well, then yeah, then we're going to be afraid of anything that's going to block my ability to acquire more stuff. And whereas again, like the guy in Africa, the Peace Corps guy is saying is, no, those people, so, to them, what was important was, like you say, having a baby to celebrate, and then calling the neighbors over. Hey, we had a new kid last night, and people bring food over and have a nice celebration, and they celebrate just being around other people. And not to say that we don't do that, but I think that we've been, we've allowed this other way of thinking to have an inordinate amount of influence on us, and now we're starting to pay a price for it. I mean, this is not going to end well.
Yeah, absolutely. One last quick break. I want to thank Kelton and Jill Steckline, some very good friends of mine. I appreciate you guys listening. Thank you for supporting. They pledged $200 and help us to chip away a little bit more at those matching funds. Thank you so very much, Kelton and Jill. Please consider joining with them and calling 785-621-4110. 785-621-4110. Father Fred, he supports the station. I support the station. My wife and I, Kelton and Jill, all the people who have donated. We've got about 1 hour left. If you could ask the good Lord, hey, what do you want me to give? And then call in 785-621-4110. Let's make it to our goal. All right, Father, we have about 5 minutes left. We've done a good job of talking about result-oriented morality, being able to see, do the results add up to make this a good situation or a bad situation for society? What would you like to leave us with today in the next 5 minutes?
Well, again, just the idea, just to have the folks just, if you can, you might have to go back and, they'll probably make a double-edged sword out of this Carathon episode here, but go back and listen to it again to really kind of try to get your mind around this idea of, let's, whatever the issue is, we'll just put aside the Bible for now. We'll just put aside the church. We'll put aside religion and go, is this going to generate a good result or a bad result? Is this going to generate something that I want to live with? And again, I'm not afraid to put the church and religion aside, because this is going to get us to the same place. We're going to end up in the same spot. Faith and the scriptures and the teachings of the church will tell me that, family life is a good thing that should be pursued. And now that we rejected family life for the past 50 years or so, and we're seeing the results of it, we can see that, well, family life is a good thing that should be pursued. It's both going to get us to the same place. So,
yeah, fantastic. And then is there anything else that you would point to really quickly? Any other issues that you would say, what, look at this. How's it affecting society? Is that really a good outcome?
Well, I think that when I remember I saw a real funny, the guy was serious, about consumerism. And he said, the consumerist is the guy that has the garage so full of junk that he can't park his car in it.
Yeah.
And he sees all the junk, and instead of seeing all the junk, he sees the one thing he doesn't have that he wants, and again, I think we need to ask ourselves, is that generating a good result? Is filling our cars and our closets up with junk that we don't use, and then going out and thinking that, well, I'll be happy if I acquire more junk, is that working? Is that working out for us? And I think most of us would say, no, it's not, and so, we would just kind of make a decision as to, should I reevaluate what I think is important?
Yeah. And I think on that train of thought, one of those things that I would say is, I had somebody in here the other day and we were talking a little bit about this, but they consider advanced maternal age 35 now. And if you go out and look at studies, a lot of people are waiting till they're about 30 years old before they have their first child. And your 20s actually are your most fertile times. So they're skipping out on all of that, to say, well, let's get everything set up. Let's have enough. And that's what I've noticed is I actually asked a couple of this once. I said, well, what's enough? And when they give you an answer, or if they're even able to give you an answer is the first thing. But if they do give you an answer, then the next question is, so what happens when you make it there? Do you think the goalpost is going to stay there? Or are you going to be like, you know what? Actually, it was kind of nice to have this. Maybe now I need a nicer vehicle. Maybe now I need some jet skis. Maybe now I need X. And that's what I've noticed is if you say we're going to wait to have children until we're ready. Now, I'm not saying like the legitimate, like, okay, we don't have a house, we're living out of our car or something like that, but everybody has those excuses that, well, we're going to wait till we're ready. Well, what is ready? So same type of thing there. If you look at what is it causing in society, is it helping our situation? No. One, we're becoming more materialistic. Two, we have a shrinking population. So in the end, doesn't look like it works out.
Well, I think I was listening earlier this week, and Lester and Danetta Robin were on, and they were sharing the story about how when they got married, they had nothing.
Yeah.
She said I had a set of pots and pans. I very said Lester had, and they had a little apartment, and the landlord gave them the couch, what have you.
Yeah.
But then what Danetta said, which I think some people miss, she goes, but everything we have now, it's because we worked for it and built it up together.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's that's what's missing is people having the trust in God, and the trust in the structures that are around us. I mean, the American economy is an incredible machine, and that people that get out there and work hard and scrap, and if they're frugal and make wise decisions, they're going to get ahead. And so again, like I said, with Danetta saying, everything we have, we built up together. And rather than saying, well, no, life is no good until we have it all now. Well, no, there's a tremendous benefit to that process of building it up together as a couple.
Absolutely. Father, would you leave us with your priestly blessing, please?
Sure. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen.
Amen.
And may Almighty God bless all of our listeners. May He bless you and keep you. Let His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. And may He look upon you kindly and give you His peace, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so very much, Father. We appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. You are listening to Divine Mercy Radio's Fall Carathon Light in the Darkness. I want to thank John Krychek for pledging $100, and that becomes that $200 pledge with those matching funds. I think that takes us down to about $1,900 in matching funds. If you could help us to continue chipping away, we have this last hour and we're almost there. We're so close to the goalpost. Help us out. If you can call in and help us to use up that 19